A young university student from a humble background, Sarah, works as an intern at one of Silicon Valley's largest tech companies. During a crucial corporate presentation, she is publicly humiliated by the Millionaire CEO because of her modest appearance and worn-out shoes. What he doesn't realize is that Sarah possesses extraordinary talent and an unshakable determination that will change not only her own life, but also everyone's perception of the true value of people. A story about perseverance, dignity, and how appearances can be completely deceiving. I still remember the exact sound my worn-out sneakers made against the polished marble floor of TechVision's headquarters that morning. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Each step echoed through the pristine lobby like a reminder that I didn't belong there. But I held my head high anyway, clutching my laptop bag tighter as I walked past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown San Francisco. My name is Sarah Chen, and 6 months ago I thought landing an internship at TechVision Industries was the luckiest break of my life. Fresh out of community college, working 2 jobs to pay for my computer science degree at San Francisco State, this opportunity felt like a door opening to everything I'd dreamed of. The company was worth billions, led by the infamous Marcus Blackwood, a man whose face graced the covers of Forbes and Time magazine regularly. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I arrived at 6:30 a.m., an hour before most employees, because the early morning hours in the office were sacred to me. No one bothering me, no condescending looks, just me and my code. I'd been working on something special during these quiet moments, a project that consumed every free minute I had. "Sarah, you're here early again," called out Janet, the night security guard who was just finishing her shift. She was one of the few people in the building who actually treated me like a human being. "You know me, Janet." "The early bird catches the worm," I replied, managing a smile despite the exhaustion weighing on my shoulders. I'd been at my second job until midnight, cleaning office buildings downtown. The bags under my eyes told that story clearly. As I settled into my cramped cubicle in the intern section, I pulled out my laptop, a 7-year-old Dell that I'd bought used and repaired myself. It wasn't pretty, but it ran the programs I needed. Just like my shoes weren't pretty, but they got me where I needed to go. The holes in my sneakers had appeared 3 weeks ago. Not huge holes, but visible enough that I'd started trying to position my feet differently during meetings. I'd been saving every penny for months, torn between buying new shoes or keeping the money for next semester's textbooks. The textbooks won, they always did. Around 8 a.m., the office started filling up with TechVision's regular employees. They arrived in their Tesla Model S cars, their designer suits, their Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. I watched them through my peripheral vision, noting how they moved with a confidence that money provides. Straight backs, firm handshakes, voices that never apologized for taking up space. "Morning, intern," Marcus Chen, the senior developer, said as he passed by my desk. Not Marcus Blackwood, the CEO, but Marcus Chen, who shared my last name and somehow made it sound like an insult every time he said it. "Still using that dinosaur laptop?" I looked up at him, his perfectly styled hair and his shirt that probably cost more than my rent. "It gets the job done," I replied simply. He snorted. "Barely, I'm sure. Maybe if you spent less time making excuses and more time upgrading your tools, your work might actually impress someone around here." I bit my tongue, hard, because what Marcus Chen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my dinosaur laptop had been running calculations and developing code that could revolutionize their entire user interface system. I'd been working on it for months, perfecting every line, every function, every possible scenario. Around 10 a.m., Amanda from HR appeared at my cubicle. Amanda was nice enough, but she had that careful, measured way of speaking to me that people use when they're trying very hard to be politically correct. "Sarah, Mr. Blackwood wants all interns to attend the quarterly presentation this morning. Conference room A, 11 a.m. sharp. It's unusual for interns to be included, but he specifically requested all staff members." My stomach dropped. Marcus Blackwood was legendary for his presentations, but also for his brutal honesty and zero tolerance for anything he considered substandard. Stories circulated about employees being fired on the spot for minor mistakes during his presentations. "Do I need to prepare anything?" I asked. "Just look professional," Amanda said, her eyes briefly glancing at my outfit, a clean but obviously inexpensive blouse, and my only pair of dress pants paired with those increasingly problematic sneakers. "You know how Mr. Blackwood values presentation." I spent the next hour in the bathroom, trying to angle my feet so the holes weren't visible, practicing sitting positions that would hide the worn soles. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to reduce the puffiness from too little sleep and too much stress. Conference Room A was TechVision's crown jewel, a massive space with a wall of windows overlooking the bay, a table that could seat 50 people, and technology that cost more than most people's houses. As I entered, I immediately felt the weight of everyone's stares. Employees in their perfect outfits, their confident postures, their expensive accessories. I found a seat near the back, hoping to blend into the background. But as the room filled up, it became clear that there was no hiding. We were all there for a reason. At exactly 11 a.m., Marcus Blackwood strode into the room like he owned the world, which in many ways he did. At 42, he was worth an estimated $2 billion, had been featured on the cover of every major business magazine, and had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely unforgiving of mediocrity. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. His silver watch caught the light as he moved, and his presence commanded immediate silence from everyone in the room. This was a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had competed with Google and Apple and won, who had the kind of success that people wrote books about. "Good morning, everyone." His voice carried easily across the room without a microphone. "Today I want to talk about excellence, about the standards that have made TechVision the industry leader it is today." He clicked a remote, and the massive screen behind him lit up with TechVision's quarterly numbers. Impressive didn't begin to cover it. Revenue up 340%, user engagement through the roof, stock prices that made investors very, very happy. "These numbers don't happen by accident," he continued, pacing in front of the screen with predatory grace. "They happen because we demand excellence from every single person in this organization, from our senior executives down to our newest employees." His eyes swept the room, and I sank lower in my chair. Excellence isn't just about the work you produce. It's about how you present yourself, how you carry yourself, how you represent this company every single day. When clients see you, when investors meet you, when the media interviews you, you are TechVision. The presentation continued for 20 minutes, covering market projections, upcoming projects, and strategic goals. I found myself genuinely fascinated despite my nervousness. This was the kind of high-level business strategy they didn't teach in community college, the real-world application of everything I'd been studying. Then, disaster struck. "Now," Marcus Blackwood said, setting down his remote and scanning the room again, "I want to address something that's been bothering me. We've been talking about excellence, about standards, about representing this company with pride." His gaze moved methodically across the room, row by row. My heart started beating faster. "But I'm looking around this room, and I'm seeing some things that concern me, some things that make me question whether everyone here truly understands what it means to work for TechVision." The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop, and then his eyes landed on me. "You," he said, pointing directly at me. "Stand up." Time seemed to slow down. Every person in that room, 53 employees I'd counted when I came in, turned to look at me. My face burned with embarrassment, but I forced myself to stand. My legs felt like jelly. "What's your name?" "Sarah Chen, sir. I'm an intern in the development department." "Sarah Chen." He repeated my name like he was tasting something unpleasant. "Tell me, Sarah, what do you think TechVision stands for?" My mouth went dry. "Innovation, sir. Excellence. Creating technology that changes people's lives." "That's right. Innovation. Excellence." He started walking toward my section of the room, and I felt like a deer caught in headlights. "And tell me, Sarah, do you think your appearance right now reflects those values?" I didn't understand the question at first. "Sir, look down at your feet, Sarah." Oh God. My stomach dropped to the floor. He'd noticed the holes in my shoes. "Look down at your feet and tell me what you see." I looked down, and there they were, my worn-out sneakers with their visible holes looking even shabbier against the pristine carpet of Conference Room A. "I see. My shoes, sir." "Your shoes." His voice was cold now, analytical. "Shoes with holes in them. Shoes that looked like they were pulled out of a garbage can. Shoes that you thought were appropriate to wear to a professional presentation at a billion-dollar company." The humiliation was crushing. I could feel 52 pairs of eyes on me, could sense the mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment radiating from my colleagues. Some people were looking at their phones, pretending this wasn't happening. Others were staring openly, fascinated by the train wreck unfolding before them. "Do you know how much this company spends on its image, Sarah? On marketing, on public relations, on making sure that every interaction with TechVision reflects our commitment to excellence?" I understand, sir. Do you? Because when you walk into this building wearing shoes with holes in them, When you sit in our conference room looking like you just rolled out of bed, you're telling our clients, our investors, our partners that we don't have standards, that we'll accept mediocrity. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to sink through the floor and never come back. But something inside me, some stubborn part of my character that had gotten me through community college while working 2 jobs, that had pushed me to apply for this internship in the first place, refused to completely crumble. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I understand your concern about professional appearance, but I'd like to respectfully point out that I've never missed a day of work, never missed a deadline, and my code reviews have been consistently rated above average." A murmur went through the room. No one spoke back to Marcus Blackwood, ever. His eyebrows raised slightly. "Above average? How admirable." The sarcasm in his voice could have cut glass. "Tell me, Sarah, do you think above average is what built this company? Do you think above average is what makes us leaders in this industry?" "No, sir, but I think judging someone's potential based on their shoes might cause you to miss out on their actual abilities." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Marcus Blackwood stared at me for what felt like an eternity, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Abilities." He almost smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Here's what I see, Sarah. I see someone who makes excuses instead of solutions. Someone who thinks effort should be rewarded regardless of results. Someone who doesn't understand that in the real world, perception matters as much as performance." He turned away from me to address the entire room. "This is exactly the kind of mediocre thinking that kills companies. The idea that good intentions matter more than results, that we should lower our standards to accommodate people who can't meet them." I remained standing, my face burning, my hands shaking slightly, but I didn't sit down, I didn't apologize. Something was building inside me, not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but something else. Determination maybe, or desperation. Sometimes they look the same. "Let me make something clear to everyone in this room," Marcus Blackwood continued, still facing away from me. "TechVision didn't become successful by making exceptions. We didn't revolutionize this industry by accepting good enough. We did it by demanding excellence from everyone in every aspect of their performance." He turned back to me. "So here's what's going to happen, Sarah. You're going to go back to your little cubicle, and you're going to think very carefully about whether you have what it takes to work here. Because frankly, I'm not impressed by what I see." The dismissal was clear. I was supposed to sit down, shut up, and disappear, accept the humiliation and learn my place. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Mr. Blackwood, what if I could prove that appearances can be deceiving?" He paused, his hand halfway to his jacket pocket. "Excuse me? What if I could show you something that might change your mind about judging people based on their shoes?" The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus Blackwood's assistant, a sharp-looking woman in her 30s, was frantically making cutting motions with her hand, trying to get me to stop talking, but I was past the point of no return now. "What exactly are you suggesting, Miss Chen? Give me 5 minutes of your presentation time. Let me show you what this intern with holes in her shoes has been working on during those early morning hours in the office." For the first time since he'd started speaking, Marcus Blackwood looked genuinely surprised. He studied me with new interest, like I was a puzzle he hadn't expected. "You want me to give you 5 minutes of my quarterly presentation to what? Show me some basic coding project." "Not basic, sir, and not just coding." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "I want to show you the future of TechVision's user interface, something that could increase user engagement by at least 200% and reduce customer support tickets by 60%. The numbers weren't pulled out of thin air. I'd been testing my system for weeks, running simulations, analyzing data. I knew exactly what my project could do. Marcus Blackwood looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at his watch, that expensive silver watch that probably cost more than most people's cars. "You know what, Miss Chen, you've got guts, terrible judgment, but guts." He gestured toward the front of the room. 5 minutes. Show me what you've got. But understand this, if you waste my time, if you embarrass yourself even more than you already have, your internship ends today." As I walked toward the front of the room, my worn sneakers squeaking against the marble floor, I realized that everything was about to change. One way or another, my life at TechVision would never be the same after the next 5 minutes. I reached the front of the room, my laptop bag in hand, and turned to face 53 people who were about to witness either my greatest triumph or my most spectacular failure. The holes in my shoes had never felt smaller. I walked to the front of that conference room with my heart hammering against my ribs, so hard I thought it might burst. Every step felt like I was walking toward either my salvation or my execution. The silence in the room was deafening. 53 people watching me, waiting to see if the girl with holes in her shoes was about to make the biggest fool of herself in tech vision history. Marcus Blackwood stood with his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of curiosity and barely contained impatience. His assistant, Rebecca, was frantically typing something on her phone, probably alerting security to be ready to escort me out. "Your 5 minutes start now," he said, tapping his expensive watch. I connected my old Dell laptop to the conference room's state-of-the-art presentation system. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. The screen remained blank while my laptop wheezed and struggled to connect. I could hear people shifting in their seats, someone coughing, the quiet murmur of whispered conversations. "Having technical difficulties, Miss Chen?" Marcus's voice carried that same condescending tone he'd been using since he first pointed me out. "Just a moment, sir," I replied, my fingers flying over the keyboard. I'd anticipated this. My laptop was old, but I'd spent hours configuring it to work with different presentation systems. Finally, the connection established, and my interface appeared on the massive screen. What they saw wasn't fancy. No flashy graphics, no corporate design elements, just clean, elegant code and a user interface that looked deceptively simple. "This," I began, my voice stronger than I felt, "is ARIA, Adaptive Response and Intelligent Assistance. It's not just a user interface upgrade, it's a complete reimagining of how people interact with technology." I clicked to the first demonstration. The screen showed TechVision's current user interface, the one that millions of people used every day. It was functional, professional, but static. Our current system requires users to navigate through multiple menus to accomplish basic tasks. Customer data shows that 67% of users abandon complex processes halfway through because they can't find what they're looking for. I could see Marcus's eyebrows raise slightly. He hadn't expected me to have actual data. ARIA changes that completely. I clicked to my demonstration and the screen came alive. The interface I'd created didn't just respond to clicks. It learned, adapted, predicted what users needed before they knew they needed it. "Watch what happens when a user logs in," I said, running through a simulation. ARIA analyzes their usage patterns, their most frequent tasks, their time of day preferences, even their typing speed and mouse movement patterns. It creates a personalized dashboard that evolves in real time. The demonstration showed how the interface rearranged itself based on user behavior. Frequently used features moved to prominent positions, rarely used options faded into the background, and the system began predicting what the user wanted to accomplish next. The machine learning algorithm I developed processes over 2,000 data points per user session. I continued, clicking through more examples. It doesn't just track what people click, it analyzes how long they hover over options, what they search for, where their cursor moves, even their typing patterns to gauge frustration levels. I could see I had their attention now. The whispered conversations had stopped. Even Marcus had uncrossed his arms and was leaning forward slightly, studying the screen. "But this is just the surface level," I said, warming to my subject. "ARIA also includes predictive assistance. Watch this." I ran a simulation showing how the system anticipated user needs. When someone started typing an email, it suggested relevant attachments based on the recipient and subject matter. When they opened a project file, it automatically loaded related documents and highlighted potential conflicts or updates they might have missed. The beta testing I've been running shows a 230% increase in task completion rates and a 68% reduction in user support tickets, I said, clicking to my data visualization. Users accomplish more in less time with less frustration. Marcus Blackwood stepped closer to the screen, studying the numbers. "You said beta testing. What kind of testing?" This was the moment I'd been dreading. "I've been running it on myself and a few volunteer users from online forums. I know it's not official company testing, but I wanted to prove the concept before." "You've been running unauthorized software on company computers?" His voice was sharp. "No, sir, I built a completely separate testing environment using my own resources. Everything I'm showing you was developed on my personal time, using my own equipment." I gestured toward my worn laptop. "That's why I need this dinosaur. It's been running ARIA's development environment for 6 months." Something shifted in his expression. I couldn't read it. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "Continue," he said simply. I clicked to the next section of my presentation. "But ARIA isn't just about individual user experience. It's about organizational intelligence. The system learns patterns across all users in a company, identifying bottlenecks, inefficiencies, and optimization opportunities that individual users might never notice. The screen showed a simulated company dashboard. Different departments were represented as interconnected nodes, with data flowing between them in real time. The system highlighted areas where processes were slowing down, where information was getting stuck, where teams were duplicating effort without realizing it. Imagine being able to see in real time that your marketing department is creating assets that your sales team doesn't know exist, or that your development team is solving problems that customer service could have flagged weeks earlier. ARIA creates organizational awareness that goes beyond traditional analytics. I was hitting my stride now, the fear beginning to transform into excitement. This was my passion, my vision for how technology could actually help people instead of just complicating their lives. The security implications are significant too, I continued. ARIA's behavioral analysis can detect unusual patterns that might indicate security breaches or unauthorized access. Not just failed login attempts, but subtle changes in user behavior that might suggest account compromise. Marcus was studying the demonstration intently now. I could see him mentally calculating, processing what this could mean for TechVision's market position. What about scalability? He asked suddenly. This level of personalization and machine learning, the processing power required would be enormous. I'd hoped he'd ask that question. That's the beautiful part. ARIA uses distributed processing and edge computing. Instead of requiring massive central servers, it utilizes the processing power of users' devices and creates a network effect. The more users you have, the more efficient the system becomes, not less efficient. I clicked to my technical architecture diagram. I've designed it to be completely modular. Companies can implement basic personalization features first, then add predictive assistance, then organizational intelligence, then security monitoring. Each module is independently functional, but exponentially more powerful when combined. And the development timeline? This question came from Janet Morrison, TechVision's Chief Technology Officer, who'd been silent until now. The core framework is already complete, I replied. I estimate 6 months for full implementation and testing of the basic personalization features, another 4 months for predictive assistance, and maybe 8 months for full organizational intelligence integration. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the screen. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Why haven't you presented this through proper channels? Why ambush me in a quarterly presentation instead of following protocol? The honest answer was complicated. I tried, sir. I submitted proposals through the intern feedback system. I requested meetings with my supervisors. I was told that interns don't make system-level suggestions, that my job was to learn existing processes, not try to change them. I saw several people in the room shift uncomfortably. Marcus Chen, the senior developer who'd been dismissive of me all morning, was suddenly very interested in his smartphone. I also knew that if I presented this as Sarah Chen, intern with holes in her shoes, it would be dismissed before anyone looked at the actual work. I needed to show you what I could do, not just tell you. Marcus Blackwood was quiet for what felt like an eternity. The room was so silent, I could hear the air conditioning humming in the vents. If this story moved you, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this. Finally, he spoke. Miss Chen, this is either the most sophisticated presentation I've ever seen from an intern, or you're about to revolutionize how we think about user interface design. My breath caught in my throat. Janet, he said, turning to the CTO, I want you to assemble a team to evaluate this immediately. Full technical review, security analysis, scalability assessment. I want to know if this is as good as it looks. Yes, sir, Janet replied, making notes on her tablet. And Rebecca, he continued, addressing his assistant, clear my calendar for tomorrow afternoon. I want to meet with Miss Chen privately to discuss this further. The room was buzzing now, people leaning toward each other, whispering rapidly. I could see expressions ranging from amazement to jealousy to confusion on faces throughout the room. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. However, Miss Chen, I want to make something absolutely clear. What you've shown me today is impressive, potentially game-changing even, but you've also demonstrated a concerning willingness to circumvent established protocols, to work outside proper channels, to ambush your superiors in public forums. My heart sank. Even success was going to come with consequences. These are not the actions of someone who respects authority or understands corporate structure. These are the actions of someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them. He paused, letting that sink in. Fortunately for you, these are also exactly the kinds of actions that built this company in the first place. The willingness to disrupt, to challenge conventional thinking, to risk everything on a vision that others can't see yet. I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster, climbing toward either triumph or disaster with each word he spoke. So here's what's going to happen, Miss Chen. If Janet's team confirms that your area system is as revolutionary as it appears, we're going to have a very different conversation about your future at TechVision. You'll be moved from the intern program to our advanced development team, with a salary commensurate with the value you're providing. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Interns didn't get promoted to advanced development, ever. But, he continued, raising his voice slightly to restore quiet, if your system doesn't live up to what you've promised, if this is all show and no substance, then your internship ends immediately, and you'll find it very difficult to get another position in this industry. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. Good. He looked around the room one final time. Let this be a lesson to everyone here. Excellence comes in many packages. Sometimes it wears expensive suits and Italian leather shoes. Sometimes it wears sneakers with holes in them. The key is learning to recognize it regardless of the packaging. As he gathered his presentation materials preparing to leave, he paused and looked back at me one more time. Oh, and Miss Chen, get some new shoes. If you're going to be representing TechVision at the level I think you might be, you'll need to look the part. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I smiled. Yes, sir, already on my shopping list. As people began filing out of the conference room, chattering excitedly about what they'd just witnessed, I stood at the front of the room, disconnecting my laptop with shaking hands. Everything had changed in 5 minutes. Everything. The rest of that Tuesday passed in a blur of stares, whispers, and carefully polite congratulations from colleagues who had completely ignored me just hours before. Word of what happened in Conference Room A spread through TechVision faster than a computer virus. By lunchtime, people I'd never spoken to were nodding at me in the hallways. By 3 p.m., my cubicle had become an unofficial tourist attraction, with employees finding excuses to walk past and get a look at the intern who stood up to Blackwood. But I couldn't focus on any of it. My mind was spinning with the magnitude of what had just happened and what it might mean. In less than 24 hours, Janet Morrison's technical team would begin evaluating ARIA. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd dreamed of, would be put under a microscope by some of the best minds in Silicon Valley. What if I'd oversold it? What if the system I'd built in my tiny apartment, running on borrowed server space and caffeine-fueled determination, couldn't stand up to enterprise-level scrutiny? What if Marcus Blackwood's promise to destroy my career prospects wasn't just dramatic posturing? At 6 p.m., when most of the office had cleared out, I was still at my desk, obsessively running through my code, checking and rechecking every function, every algorithm, every line that could potentially fail under professional evaluation. Sarah. I looked up to find Janet Morrison standing beside my cubicle, the Chief Technology Officer of TechVision, a woman who'd been profiled in Wired magazine, who held 14 patents, who'd been personally recruited from Google by Marcus Blackwood himself, was standing at my intern desk like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ms. Morrison, Call me Janet, she said, pulling up a chair. I wanted to talk to you privately before tomorrow's evaluation. My stomach clenched. If this is about the presentation protocol, I know I should have gone through proper channels, but Sarah, stop. Her voice was kind but firm. I'm not here to reprimand you. I'm here because I've been in this industry for 23 years, and what you did today was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I'm trying to figure out which. She leaned back in the chair, studying me with intelligent brown eyes. Tell me about your background, not the resume version, the real version. I hesitated for a moment, then decided honesty was my only option at this point. My parents immigrated from Taiwan when I was 8. My father works as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex in Daly City. My mother cleans houses. They've worked 16-hour days my entire life to give me opportunities they never had. Janet nodded, encouraging me to continue. I went to community college because we couldn't afford a 4-year university. I'm working my way through San Francisco State now, taking classes part-time while working 2 jobs, this internship and cleaning office buildings at night. The ARIA system. I built it because I was frustrated with how needlessly complicated most software is. My parents struggle with technology because interfaces aren't designed for people like them. People like them? People who didn't grow up with computers, people who work multiple jobs and don't have time to figure out why their email client suddenly moved all the buttons around in an update. People who just want technology to help them accomplish tasks, not create new obstacles. Janet was quiet for a moment, processing this. That's an interesting perspective. Most developers design for other developers or for idealized users who have plenty of time and patience. You're designing for real people with real limitations. Exactly. I felt some of my tension ease. She understood what I was trying to accomplish. But Sarah, I have to ask, and I need you to be completely honest with me, is Aria everything you presented it to be? Because if Marcus's team starts using this and it fails, it won't just end your career. It could set back user interface development at Tech Vision by years. The weight of that responsibility hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on proving myself, on showing that I belonged here, that I hadn't fully considered the broader implications of failure. Janet, I've been testing Aria for 6 months. I've run it through every scenario I could imagine, stress-tested it with different user types, monitored its performance across different systems. It's not perfect, no software is, but it works. It works better than anything I've ever seen. 6 months of testing by one person isn't the same as enterprise-level evaluation, she pointed out gently. I know, but I also know that I've spent more time thinking about user experience in the past 6 months than most companies spend in product development cycles. I've watched my mother struggle with software updates that broke familiar workflows. I've seen my father give up on digital tools that could make his job easier because they're too complicated to learn. I turned my laptop screen toward her, showing her the Aria interface. This isn't just code to me, it's personal. Every function, every feature, every design decision was made with real people in mind, people who deserve technology that works for them, not against them. Janet studied the screen, clicking through some of the demonstration features. The machine learning components are sophisticated. Where did you learn this level of AI development? Online courses mostly. MIT has some of their computer science lectures available for free. Stanford publishes research papers. I spent most of last year teaching myself machine learning theory, then started applying it to interface design. Most of last year? She looked up at me sharply. Sarah, this level of AI integration, this is graduate level work, PhD level even. I felt heat creep up my neck. I know it might seem presumptuous. It's not presumptuous, it's extraordinary. She closed my laptop and looked at me directly. But it also explains why you couldn't get anyone to take you seriously through normal channels. What you've created challenges fundamental assumptions about how interface design works. Most people in this industry, myself included, would have dismissed it as impossible from an intern. We sat in silence for a moment. The office around us was nearly empty now, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Janet, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Marcus Blackwood was right? About the shoes, about professional appearance, about standards. She considered this carefully. Marcus is brilliant, Sarah. He's also incredibly demanding and sometimes unnecessarily harsh. But here's what I've learned in 23 years in tech. Perception matters more than we'd like it to. Fair or not, people make decisions about your competence based on how you present yourself. So I should have bought new shoes instead of textbooks? No. Her answer was immediate and firm. You should never have had to choose between basic professional attire and education. The fact that you did choose and chose education tells me everything I need to know about your priorities and your character. She stood up, preparing to leave. But Sarah, if tomorrow goes well, if Aria proves to be what you've promised, you're going to find yourself in a very different world. Corporate lunches, client presentations, investor meetings. You'll need to learn how to play that game, not because appearance matters more than ability, but because you'll need every advantage you can get. What comes next is even stronger. And to not miss the ending, tap the subscribe button now. It's free and you'll be with me in every new story. I understand. Good. Now, I have one more question, and this one's crucial. Are you prepared for success? Because if Aria is everything you've presented it to be, your life is about to change completely. No more quiet mornings in an empty office. No more anonymity. No more being underestimated. Are you ready for that? I thought about my parents working their multiple jobs, sacrificing everything for opportunities I was only beginning to understand. I thought about every professor who'd encouraged me, every late night spent coding instead of sleeping, every moment of doubt I'd pushed through to get to this point. I'm ready, I said. We'll see. She smiled, but it was a complex smile, part encouragement, part warning. Get some sleep tonight, Sarah. Tomorrow is going to be intense. After she left, I stayed in the office until nearly 10 p.m., running final checks on Arya's code, creating backup documentation, preparing for every possible question the evaluation team might ask. The building grew quiet around me, just me and the soft glow of computer screens. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Working late again? Don't forget to eat. Proud of you always." I stared at that message for a long time, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The sacrifices my parents had made, the choices I'd made, the risks I was taking. Tomorrow I would find out if it had all been worth it. At 10:15, I finally packed up my laptop and headed for the exit. As I walked through the lobby, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors, I caught my reflection in the wall of windows overlooking the city. There I was, Sarah Chen, 22 years old, wearing a bargain store blouse and shoes with holes in them, carrying a 7-year-old laptop that contained what might be the future of user interface design. The security guard, Janet, was back on duty for the night shift. "Working late again, Sarah. Big day tomorrow," I replied. "Well, whatever it is, you'll handle it. I can tell you've got that determined look. Same look my daughter had when she graduated nursing school." As I walked to the bus stop, I thought about determination, about dreams, about the fine line between ambition and delusion. In less than 12 hours, I would find out which side of that line I'd been living on. The bus ride home took 45 minutes, winding through the hills of San Francisco toward my tiny studio apartment in the Mission District. I spent the entire ride staring out the window at the city lights, thinking about tomorrow, about possibilities, about everything that could go right or catastrophically wrong. By the time I reached my apartment, it was nearly midnight. I had a sandwich for dinner, reviewed my presentation notes one final time, and tried to get some sleep. I lay awake until 3 a.m., my mind racing through scenarios, possibilities, and what-ifs. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed about code, algorithms, and conference rooms filled with people whose respect I was desperate to earn. I had no idea that in less than 10 hours, everything I thought I knew about my future was about to change again. I woke up at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before my alarm was set to go off. My stomach was churning with anxiety, and I'd barely slept 3 hours. Today was evaluation day, the day that would determine whether I was about to become TechVision's newest rising star or its most spectacular failure. I made coffee with hands that shook slightly, went through my morning routine twice to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, and arrived at the office at 6:15 a.m. The building was almost empty, just a few early arrivals and the cleaning crew finishing their night shift. At my cubicle, I found something that made me stop dead in my tracks, a small gift bag sitting on my keyboard with a note attached. "Sarah, thought you might need these today. Knock them dead. Janet." Inside the bag was a pair of professional black flats. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but clean, new, and exactly my size. I stared at them for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of the gesture. Janet Morrison, CTO of a billion-dollar company, had somehow figured out my shoe size and bought me professional footwear. I slipped off my worn sneakers and put on the new shoes. They felt strange, solid, supportive, like they could carry me anywhere I needed to go. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about hiding my feet or positioning them to conceal holes. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. At 9 a.m., Janet's evaluation team gathered in Conference Room B, the same room where my career had nearly ended just 24 hours earlier. I could see them through the glass walls. 6 senior developers, 2 security specialists, a user experience expert, and Janet herself, all hunched over laptops and tablets, diving deep into Arya's code. I tried to focus on my regular intern tasks, but it was impossible. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing toward Conference Room B, trying to read facial expressions, looking for any sign of how the evaluation was going. Around 10:30, Marcus Chen, the senior developer, not the CEO, stopped by my cubicle. His attitude toward me had shifted noticeably since yesterday's presentation, from dismissive to carefully respectful. "How are you holding up?" he asked, and for the first time since I'd known him, he seemed genuinely concerned. "Nervous," I admitted, trying not to think about it too much. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I spent some time last night looking at the documentation you submitted with your presentation. That's some seriously sophisticated work, Sarah. I owe you an apology for how I treated you before." I looked up at him, surprised. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. I made assumptions based on appearances, and that was wrong. If the evaluation goes well, I hope you'll consider letting me be part of the implementation team." After he left, I sat staring at my computer screen, not really seeing it. The same people who had dismissed me, who had made me feel invisible and inadequate, were now treating me like I might actually belong here. The transformation was surreal. At 11:45 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Can you come to conference room B? We'd like to ask you some questions." My heart rate immediately doubled. Questions could be good. Clarifications, technical details, implementation discussions, or they could be bad. Confusion, problems, fundamental flaws they'd discovered in my work. I walked to conference room B on unsteady legs, my new shoes clicking confidently against the floor, even though I felt anything but confident inside. The evaluation team looked tired. They'd been at this for nearly 3 hours, diving deep into code, running tests, analyzing performance metrics. Laptops covered the conference table, along with printed code documentation, whiteboards covered with diagrams and notes. "Sarah, please sit," Janet said, gesturing to a chair at the head of the table. "We've been reviewing ARIA extensively, and we have some questions." I sat down, trying to read the faces around the table. Some looked impressed, others seemed puzzled, a few appeared concerned. It was impossible to tell which way this was going. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the lead security specialist, spoke first. "The behavioral analysis components of ARIA are remarkably sophisticated. The pattern recognition algorithms you've developed could potentially identify security threats that our current systems would miss entirely." That sounded positive. I allowed myself to feel a tiny spark of hope. "But," he continued, "we're concerned about privacy implications. The level of user monitoring required for ARIA to function effectively raises significant questions about data collection and user consent." My heart sank. I'd anticipated this concern and had built privacy protections into the system, but explaining them under pressure was going to be challenging. "I understand the concern," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "ARIA's behavioral analysis uses differential privacy techniques. The system learns patterns without storing individual user data. Think of it like statistical analysis that improves with more data points but never retains specific personal information." "Can you show us how that works?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the user experience expert. I moved to the whiteboard and began sketching out the privacy architecture. ARIA creates anonymized behavioral profiles using local processing. Individual user actions are analyzed on their device. Patterns are extracted and anonymized. Then only the statistical patterns are shared with the learning network. The system improves its predictions without ever knowing that John in accounting clicked on Project X at 2:47 p.m. The team exchanged glances. I couldn't tell if they were impressed or skeptical. Tom Rodriguez, one of the senior developers, leaned forward. "Sarah, we've been testing ARIA's predictive capabilities, and frankly, they're almost too good. The system is anticipating user needs with accuracy rates that seem impossible. How is it doing that?" This was the question I'd been hoping for and dreading in equal measure. It was the heart of what made ARIA special, but also the most technically complex part to explain. "ARIA doesn't just analyze what users do," I said, returning to the whiteboard. "It analyzes the context around what they do. Time of day, day of week, recent email patterns, calendar appointments, even mouse movement speed and typing rhythm. It builds multidimensional behavioral models that consider dozens of contextual factors simultaneously." I drew a complex diagram showing how different data streams fed into the prediction engine. For example, if someone typically works on financial reports on Friday afternoons, but this Friday they're moving their mouse more slowly and taking longer pauses between keystrokes, ARIA might predict they're feeling overwhelmed and proactively suggest breaking the task into smaller segments or scheduling the work for Monday when they're typically more focused. "That's..." Dr. Kim paused, seeming to search for words. "That's either brilliant or terrifying. You're describing a system that knows users better than they know themselves." "The goal isn't to control user behavior," I replied quickly. "It's to reduce friction, to make technology work with human patterns instead of against them. Most software forces people to adapt to rigid interfaces. ARIA adapts to people." Janet had been quiet throughout this exchange, taking notes on her tablet. Finally, she looked up. "Sarah, there's something we need to discuss. The machine learning models you've developed, where exactly did the training data come from?" My stomach dropped. This was the question I'd been most afraid of. "I used publicly available data sets for initial training. I said carefully. User interface interaction studies from academic research, anonymized behavior patterns from open-source projects, and synthetic data I generated based on observational studies I conducted. Observational studies? Tom's eyebrows rose. I spent 6 months observing how people interact with software in public spaces, libraries, coffee shops, my parents' workplace. With permission, I added quickly. I documented common frustration patterns, typical task flows, the kinds of errors people make repeatedly. That informed the behavioral models. The room was quiet for a moment. I could practically hear them processing this information, trying to decide if my methodology was ingenious or completely inappropriate. Dr. Walsh spoke up. Sarah, what you're describing is essentially anthropological research applied to software development. That's not something we typically see from computer science backgrounds. I know it's unconventional, I replied, but I think that's part of the problem with most interface design. We design for idealized users instead of real people. ARIA is built on observations of how people actually behave, not how we think they should behave. Janet set down her tablet and looked around the table. Team, I think we need to take a break. Sarah, would you mind waiting in the hallway for a few minutes while we discuss our findings? As I stepped outside conference room B, my legs felt like jelly. Through the glass walls, I could see the evaluation team in intense discussion. Hands were gesturing, heads were shaking, people were pointing at screens and documents. It was impossible to tell if they were excited or concerned. If you want to keep hearing stories like this, tap the red button that says subscribe. It's free and it helps me keep sharing. I paced the hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. Other employees walked past, some offering encouraging smiles, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Word of the evaluation had spread through the office, and I could feel the weight of everyone's curiosity. Finally, the conference room door opened, and Janet appeared. Sarah, we're ready for you. I walked back into the room, trying to read the faces around the table. They looked serious, thoughtful, but not angry or dismissive. That had to be a good sign, right? Janet remained standing as I took my seat. Sarah, in 23 years in this industry, I've reviewed thousands of software projects, hundreds of innovative systems, and dozens of potentially revolutionary technologies. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. What you've created with ARIA is, without question, the most sophisticated and potentially impactful user interface system any of us has ever seen. I felt like I might faint from relief, but Janet wasn't finished. However, it's also the most complex, the most technically challenging, and the most risky system we've ever considered for implementation. The privacy implications alone could occupy our legal team for months. The computational requirements would necessitate significant infrastructure upgrades, and the learning curve for our development team would be substantial. My relief was quickly replaced by dread. This sounded like a very elaborate way of saying no. That said, Janet continued, and I held my breath, we believe ARIA represents the future of human-computer interaction, not just for tech vision, but for the entire industry. She paused, letting that sink in. We're recommending immediate advancement to full development status, with you as the project lead. The room exploded in congratulations, handshakes, and excited chatter, but I could barely process what was happening. Project lead, full development status. After 6 months as an intern who couldn't get anyone to listen to her ideas, I was being put in charge of what could be TechVision's next major product launch. As the evaluation team gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Janet approached me with a smile I'd never seen from her before, pure, genuine excitement. Sarah, I hope you're ready for this, because what happens next is going to be unlike anything you've ever experienced. I looked around the conference room, at the whiteboards covered with diagrams of my system, at the laptops displaying my code, at the faces of colleagues who were looking at me with new respect. I'm ready, I said, and for the first time in months I truly believed it. The next 3 weeks passed like a whirlwind that lifted me completely out of my old life and deposited me in a reality I could barely recognize. On Wednesday morning, I'd been Sarah Chen, intern with holes in her shoes. By the following Monday, I was Sarah Chen, lead developer of advanced interface systems, with a salary that made me dizzy and responsibilities that kept me awake at night. My first shock came during the meeting with Marcus Blackwood on Wednesday afternoon. I'd expected a brief conversation about project timelines and maybe some corporate expectations. Instead, I found myself in his personal office, a space that felt more like a luxury apartment than a workplace. with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay and furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Miss Chen," he said, gesturing for me to sit in a leather chair that was more comfortable than my bed at home, "I owe you an apology." I blinked in surprise. Marcus Blackwood didn't apologize, ever. It was practically part of his legend. "Sir, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." He sat across from me, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Yesterday, I judged you based on superficial appearances and nearly missed out on what could be the most significant technological advancement TechVision has seen in 5 years. That's not just bad leadership, it's stupid leadership." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. "Janet tells me you've been developing Aria for 6 months without any support, recognition, or encouragement from anyone in this company. That level of dedication and vision is exactly what built TechVision in the first place." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. What I'm about to offer you is going to change your life completely, and not all of those changes will be easy." He turned his computer screen toward me, showing a salary figure that made my breath catch in my throat. "This is your new annual compensation, effective immediately. You'll also receive stock options, full health benefits, and a development budget of $200,000 to build your team." I stared at the number on the screen. It was more money than my parents had made in their best year, combined. "Sarah, are you listening?" I realized I'd been silent for several seconds, just staring at the screen in disbelief. "Yes, sir. This is a lot to process. It's about to get more complicated. Aria isn't just going to be another product in our portfolio. If it performs as well as Janet's team believes it will, it's going to be the centerpiece of our strategy for the next 3 years. That means you'll be working directly with our executive team, presenting to investors, possibly speaking at industry conferences." The magnitude of what he was describing was overwhelming. 6 months ago, I'd been struggling to pay for textbooks. Now I was being told I might be speaking at conferences alongside industry leaders I'd only read about in magazines. "I also need you to understand the pressure you'll be under," Marcus continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Every eye in this industry will be watching Aria's development. Our competitors will try to poach you. Tech journalists will want to interview you. If the system fails or doesn't live up to expectations, the backlash won't just affect TechVision, it'll follow you for the rest of your career." "I understand, sir. Do you? Because success at this level isn't just about technical skill. It's about handling pressure, managing teams, dealing with corporate politics, representing the company in high-stakes situations. You'll need to learn skills they don't teach in computer science programs." He stood up, walking to the window overlooking the bay. "I'm going to assign Rebecca to work with you on professional development, media training, presentation skills, executive communication. You'll need to learn how to play this game, Sarah, because like it or not, you're now a player." That afternoon, I moved from my cramped intern cubicle to a corner office with actual walls, a door that closed, and a view of the city. The office came with a new laptop, a top-of-the-line MacBook Pro that made my old Dell look like a museum piece. I spent an hour just staring around the space, trying to convince myself it was real. By Thursday, Janet had assembled my development team, 4 senior developers, 2 UI/UX specialists, a data scientist, and a project manager. These were people with years of experience, multiple successful launches, and salaries that had probably been higher than mine even before my promotion. Now they were reporting to me. The first team meeting was surreal. I walked into the conference room to find 8 highly qualified professionals sitting around the table, waiting for me to tell them what to do. For a moment, I felt like a child playing dress-up in adult clothes. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know this situation is unusual. 6 months ago, I was cleaning office buildings at night and taking community college courses during the day. Last week, I was an intern most of you had never heard of. Today, I'm supposed to lead this team in developing what could be TechVision's most important product launch." I could see various expressions around the table: curiosity, skepticism, polite professionalism, masking deeper concerns. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers or that I know everything about managing a development team at this level. What I do have is 6 months of intensive work on Aria, a clear vision of what this system can accomplish, and an understanding of user needs that comes from being one of those users who gets frustrated with needlessly complicated software. Tom Rodriguez, one of the developers from Janet's evaluation team, leaned forward. "Sarah, we've all reviewed the Aria documentation. The technical work is impressive, but how do we scale development while maintaining the personal touch that makes the system special?" It was a good question, and one I'd been thinking about constantly since my promotion. "That's exactly why I need this team," I replied. "I can't maintain the same level of individual attention to user experience while managing enterprise-level development. But I can teach you to think like users instead of just developers." Over the next 2 hours, we outlined a development strategy that balanced technical excellence with user-centered design. I found myself growing more confident as we talked, realizing that while I might be inexperienced in management, I knew area better than anyone else in the room. The real culture shock came that Friday when I got my first paycheck with the new salary. The direct deposit notification on my phone showed a number I had to read 3 times to believe. After taxes and deductions, it was still more than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined. My first instinct was to call my parents, but I realized I had no idea how to explain what had happened. How do you tell your immigrant parents who've worked physical labor jobs their entire lives that their daughter just became a highly paid technology executive overnight? Instead, I took the bus home to my tiny studio apartment in the Mission District and sat on my second-hand couch staring at my bank balance on my phone. The financial security was overwhelming. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to choose between groceries and textbooks, between rent and medical care, between basic necessities and basic dignity. But the money was just the beginning of the changes. By the following Monday, my calendar was packed with meetings I didn't fully understand. Strategic planning session with executive team, Q4 product roadmap review, investor relations briefing. Each meeting came with an implied expectation that I would know how to navigate corporate dynamics I'd only observed from the outside. Rebecca Chen, Marcus's assistant, scheduled our first media training session for Tuesday morning. "You'll be doing interviews soon," she explained matter-of-factly. "Tech journalists are already asking about the mystery intern who developed Aria. We need to make sure you're prepared." "What kind of interviews?" I asked, feeling my stomach clench with anxiety. "Print interviews first, probably with Wired and TechCrunch. If Aria's launch goes well, maybe some television appearances. There's already speculation about you online. The tech blogs love a good success story." Online speculation. About me. The girl who'd been invisible for 6 months was apparently becoming the subject of industry gossip and analysis. That evening, I finally worked up the courage to call my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice warm with the familiar mix of love and worry that had defined my childhood. "Sarah, how is work? You sound tired." "Mom, I need to tell you something. Something big happened at the company." I spent the next 20 minutes trying to explain the promotion, the salary increase, the new responsibilities. My parents' English was good, but corporate technology wasn't part of their vocabulary, and the concepts I was describing felt foreign even to me. "So you're not an intern anymore?" my father asked, his voice uncertain. "No, Dad. I'm kind of a boss now. I have people working for me." There was a long pause, then my mother's voice, thick with emotion. "We're so proud of you, Sarah. So proud." But along with pride, I could hear something else in their voices, a kind of bewilderment that their daughter had entered a world they couldn't fully understand or navigate. For the first time, I realized that success could be isolating in ways I'd never anticipated. The week continued with a blur of meetings, technical discussions, and corporate protocols I was frantically trying to learn. Janet became my unofficial mentor, teaching me how to read the political dynamics in executive meetings, how to present technical concepts to non-technical decision-makers, how to balance innovation with practicality in corporate environments. "The hardest part isn't the technical work," she told me over coffee on Thursday afternoon. "It's learning to think strategically instead of just tactically. You're not just building a product anymore, you're building a business case, managing stakeholder expectations and representing TechVision's future direction." Friday brought another surprise. Marcus asked me to attend TechVision's monthly board meeting as a presenter. I would be explaining Aria's development timeline and market potential to the company's board of directors, people whose names I recognized from Forbes lists and whose investment decisions shaped entire industries. If this part also touched your heart, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this. As I prepared for the presentation that weekend, sitting in my small apartment with my new laptop and my notes spread across my tiny kitchen table, I thought about how completely my life had changed. 3 weeks ago, my biggest worry had been whether I could afford new shoes. Now I was preparing to present to board members who controlled billions of dollars in assets. The girl with holes in her shoes was gone, replaced by someone I was still learning to recognize, But as I worked through the presentation slides, refining each point and anticipating every possible question, I realized something important. The core of who I was hadn't changed. I was still someone who believed technology should serve people, not the other way around. I was still someone willing to work harder than anyone else to prove that vision was possible. The difference was that now, people were finally listening. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the San Francisco Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 3,000 technology professionals who had come to hear about Aria's official launch. The girl who had once hidden holes in her shoes was now wearing a tailored blazer and speaking to an industry conference as TechVision's youngest ever Senior Vice President of Innovation. But this moment, standing before the largest tech conference on the West Coast, wasn't what defined my transformation. That had happened 3 weeks earlier, in a meeting room I knew all too well. Let me take you back to that day, because it's where this story really ends. I was in conference room A, the same room where Marcus Blackwood had humiliated me 8 months before, preparing for our final board presentation before Aria's public launch. The system had exceeded every performance metric we'd projected. Beta testing with 50 major corporate clients had shown user satisfaction rates of 94%, productivity improvements averaging 67%, and customer support ticket reductions of 73%. As I arranged my presentation materials, I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Marcus Blackwood was approaching with someone I didn't immediately recognize, a woman in an expensive suit, walking with the confident stride of executive authority. "Sarah," Marcus said as they entered the room, "I'd like you to meet Victoria Sterling, CEO of Pinnacle Systems." "Victoria, this is Sarah Chen, the architect of Aria." Victoria Sterling. I knew that name. Pinnacle was TechVision's biggest competitor, the company that had been trying to poach our top talent for years. She was here for the same reason Marcus had specifically requested this meeting, to make me an offer I supposedly couldn't refuse. "Ms. Chen," Victoria said, extending a perfectly manicured hand, "your reputation precedes you. Aria is generating quite a buzz in our industry." "Thank you," I replied carefully, glancing at Marcus. His expression was unreadable, but I could sense the tension in the room. Victoria settled into a chair across from me, her demeanor shifting to pure business. "I'll be direct, Sarah. Pinnacle Systems is prepared to offer you a position as Chief Technology Officer with a starting salary of $2.8 million annually, plus equity that could be worth significantly more if our upcoming IPO performs as projected." The number hit me like a physical blow. $2.8 million. More money than I had ever imagined having, more than my parents would earn in their combined lifetimes. "We're also prepared to offer you complete autonomy over technology development, a team of your choosing, and the resources to develop Aria's next generation without the corporate limitations you might face here." I looked at Marcus, expecting to see concern or anger. Instead, he was watching me with what looked like curiosity, as if I were a puzzle he was trying to solve. That's a very generous offer," I managed. "It's more than generous," Victoria replied. "It's unprecedented for someone at your career stage. But then, what you've accomplished with Aria is also unprecedented." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a more personal tone. "Sarah, you're at a crossroads. You can stay here, where you'll always be the intern who got lucky, where your innovations will be filtered through corporate bureaucracy and diluted by committee decisions, or you can come with us and truly change the industry." The intern who got lucky. The words stung because part of me still feared they were true, despite everything I'd accomplished. "May I ask why you're making this offer in front of Mr. Blackwood?" I asked. Victoria smiled. "Professional courtesy, and because I want Marcus to understand exactly what he's losing if he doesn't treat you with the respect you've earned." For several moments, the room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city below. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The months of invisible work, the humiliation in this very room, the fear and doubt and determination that had driven me to prove myself. "Victoria," I said finally, "your offer is extraordinary, and I'm flattered that you see that kind of potential in me." I paused, looking around the conference room where my career had nearly ended and then truly begun. "But I'm going to stay at TechVision." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "May I ask why?" The financial package alone should make this decision obvious. I thought carefully about how to articulate what I was feeling. 8 months ago, I was humiliated in this room by someone who judged me based on my appearance rather than my abilities. It would have been easy to quit, to write off TechVision as a company that didn't value innovation or recognize talent. I looked directly at Marcus, but what I learned is that one person's limitations, even if that person is the CEO, don't define an entire organization's potential. The same company that nearly dismissed me also gave me the resources to prove what I could accomplish. The same executive who mocked my shoes also had the integrity to admit he was wrong and support my success. Victoria was listening intently, but I could see she wasn't entirely convinced. More importantly, I continued, Aria isn't just my project anymore. It's the work of an incredible team that took a chance on an untested leader. It's the result of mentorship from people like Janet Morrison, who saw potential when others saw problems. Walking away now wouldn't just be abandoning TechVision, it would be abandoning the people who believed in me when I had no reason to believe in myself. Marcus was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen from him before, something that looked like genuine respect mixed with surprise. And finally, I said, standing up, I learned something important about myself in this room 8 months ago. I don't want to be the person who runs from challenges or takes the easy path when things get difficult. I want to be the person who stays and fights and proves that transformation is possible for individuals, for companies, for entire industries. Victoria was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. That's either the most principled decision I've heard in years or the most financially naive. I'm not sure which. Maybe both, I admitted with a smile. After Victoria left, Marcus and I sat alone in the conference room where this entire journey had begun. The silence stretched between us, but it was a different kind of silence than before, contemplative rather than hostile. Sarah, he said finally, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation. I waited, curious to hear what he might say. 8 months ago, I was so focused on maintaining TechVision's image, on projecting success and polish, that I forgot the most important thing about this industry. Innovation comes from unexpected places. The best ideas often come from people who don't look like what we expect success to look like. He turned to face me directly. You could have taken Victoria's offer. You probably should have taken it. Financially, it would have been the smart choice. The fact that you didn't tells me everything I need to know about your character and your commitment to this company. Mr. Blackwood, Marcus, I think we're past formal titles at this point. Marcus, that day in this room was the worst and best thing that could have happened to my career. Yes, it was humiliating and unfair, but it also forced me to prove myself in a way I never would have otherwise. It pushed me to take risks I was afraid to take. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've been thinking about that presentation, about the moment you stood up and demanded 5 minutes to change my mind. Most people in your position would have apologized and disappeared. You chose to fight back. I chose to fight for my ideas, I corrected. There's a difference, is there? Because from where I sit, fighting for your ideas and fighting for yourself look remarkably similar. 3 weeks later, at the San Francisco Convention Center, I concluded my presentation to thunderous applause. Aria was officially launched, pre-orders were exceeding projections, and the technology press was calling it the most significant advancement in user interface design since the smartphone. But as I looked out at the audience, developers, executives, investors, journalists, I wasn't thinking about market projections or stock prices or industry recognition. I was thinking about the journey that had brought me here, about the importance of perseverance and the danger of judging potential based on appearances. After the presentation, as I was gathering my materials backstage, Janet Morrison approached with a familiar expression, the same mixture of pride and challenge I'd seen from her throughout this entire experience. So Sarah, she said, what's next? You've revolutionized user interface design, proven that talent comes in unexpected packages, and probably inspired a few thousand young developers in the audience today. Where do you go from here? I thought about her question, about the possibilities stretching ahead of me, about the responsibility that comes with success and visibility. I want to make sure that the next Sarah Chen, the next brilliant person with holes in their shoes, doesn't have to fight as hard to be heard, I replied. I want to build systems that recognize talent regardless of packaging, that give everyone the chance to prove what they're capable of. What comes next for this incredible journey? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss how this story continues to inspire others around the world. As we walked toward the exit, I caught my reflection in the convention center's polished glass doors. Designer suit, professional shoes, confident posture. I looked like success, but more importantly, I felt like myself. The same person who had coded Aria in a tiny apartment, who had stood up to Marcus Blackwood when it would have been easier to stay silent, who had chosen principle over profit when faced with an impossible decision. The girl with holes in her shoes was gone, but the values that had driven her, curiosity, determination, the belief that technology should serve everyone, not just the privileged few, those had only grown stronger. And in a world where appearances often matter more than abilities, where first impressions can determine entire futures, that felt like the most important revolution of all. My name is Sarah Chen. 8 months ago, I was nobody special. Today, I'm living proof that extraordinary things can come from the most ordinary beginnings, and this is just the beginning.